He's recording you with your consent. Peter, welcome back to the American Mixtape Class, spring 25 semester. So we kind of have the same day job, don't we? You teach undergraduates.
I do. I teach mostly college freshmen, and I teach world history.
So you're teaching that required history class. That's their favorite class. When they open up the catalog and they're like, I can't wait to take world history.
12 years, I think I've had 5 history majors. Yeah.
No history. This is the same. We have the same thing because I've got non-English majors in here. And they were like, oh, they were so excited to take literature, which is why I put.
What is this? What is this class? Is this like a required, you have to have it, and it's just reading? Like it's a required reading course, or is it writing?
Nobody here for an elective. Nobody is here for an elective.
All right.
No English majors, is that correct? Because this is the fix. The English majors have to take a version of this where they have to read the canon.
Yep.
And so they have to start with pioneer writings. Maybe if they have a good professor, they even start with the indigenous community that was here before we white people got here. But they have to take the canon starting around 1600, and they're lucky if they'll get to the 20th century. And I've only ever taught late 20th, early 21st century books. So this course is called Topics in American Lit. But it's very analogous to your world lit because they're here for the 3 hours, and it's a humanities general education that they have to take if they want to graduate.
But they know they hit the jackpot, right? Because they're in the course where they're going to read rock novels. I mean, I did not have that course as an undergrad.
I put American Mixtape in the freaking thing where they log in to sign up for their class, and my class got sold out like the first day that registration was open, and I had a waiting list. So yeah, we're doing something right. So how did you get to be a college professor? I heard you didn't even go to college when you were their age. Is that true? I heard you went and got a job somewhere. Flipping burgers.
I spent my 20s either flipping burgers or driving around the country in a series of Ford vans. And then I got an undergrad when I was 30.
And that's because you knew in high school that you wanted to be in a rock band.
Yes, I was in a rock band since 9th grade, and we knew we wanted to be big famous stars.
So the rock band you formed in 9th grade, you guys all picked up and moved from what Mecca were you in?
A lovely town called Basking Ridge, New Jersey. It's like north central Jersey. And we moved from there to Atlanta, Georgia.
Not the Jersey Shore that they've heard about.
No. This is rolling green hills and tree George Washington slept under, like super quaint. I hated it, but at the time I can look back and think it was super.
Oh no, that sounds just like Cookeville. Rolling hills and very quaint. We are quaint AF over here in Cookeville for sure. We are the quaintest of quaint. The buckle of the Bible Belt here. So you moved from quaint, where George Washington slept under a tree, and you guys at 18?
18. Yes, sir.
You just said, "Mom, see you later."
Yeah, you can imagine how that went over. Yeah.
We're moving to the ATL just like that. Now, when they get into the book, the protagonist has that moment, a similar moment where, and the first chapters are told from the expression of the dad, you guys. It's crazy. So the dad is like, my crazy son.
Yep.
Who changed his name.
Yes. And
to Spider.
Changes his name to Spider. And he's going to move to Atlanta, to Athens in his case, to be a rock star. Yes. So
I didn't tell you in the last class that I changed my name when I was at that age too, to Sunfrog. So I'm just like Spider. So I think they can get that Atlanta is cool, maybe cooler than Cookeville, and that maybe some of them wanted to go to Knoxville for school. And people want to go to Athens for school because it's the Georgia Bulldogs. It's a big deal. Yep. But when you all went there, Atlanta and Athens were like the epicenter of an indie rock revolution that I don't think they know about. So tell us a little bit about like why you guys went to Atlanta and what was going on in Athens at the time and how it just completely, even I still think about it now and it freaks me out what you all were getting to experience.
Yeah, it was like I call it weird rock or freak rock. It was guys who don't necessarily they're not the best players in the room, right? It's about chemistry and making a band that builds upon the sounds from before, but in a new way. So we went down for REM because we loved REM. Around the same time, the B-52s were also starting. And it was just this place where people could just, you knew you could go see a band any night of the week. And sometimes it'd be 10 people and sometimes it'd be 100. And on the stage would be people at least trying something interesting. Still melodic, but trying to find a new way to build rock songs. And
there were house parties too, weren't there? There was house parties, there were club shows.
Yeah, I mean, Athens has all these college kids who are always looking for a chance to go out and do whatever after, on the weekends or on nights after school. And so tiny clubs, big clubs, frat parties, house parties. I think REM's first gig was actually like at a party in a church or something, So
how did you guys do it? Like, your band was called Uncle Green. How did you get a gig? Like, you just you're in Atlanta and you're 18 years old. You just did you have a cassette tape that you took to the club, or how did you even do it at the beginning?
We had a VHS tape, and I would later be the guy in the band until we had a booking agent. I was the one who had to book the band. I would call clubs under a different name. My name was Ed Harley, taken from Chevy Chase movie Fletch, where one of his names, because it helped me separate being it made it sound like we had somebody booking us, which was exciting. And also meant I didn't have to pretend to be myself. So Ed Harley would just call around clubs trying to book gigs.
Wait, you made up a fake booking agent persona?
Yes, sir.
And when you called the club,
I was Ed Harley.
To book early Uncle Green gigs, you were this made-up persona of the booking agent.
Yes. Ed Harley did actually get a call once a year or two later from a band looking for management. And wondering if Ed Harley...
you had a multiple copy of a hand-dubbed VHS tape that you sent around?
Later with cassette tapes. The VHS tape was used once. The happening club at the time in Atlanta was called the 688. And so we drove down from Jersey to Georgia for the summer to visit our guitarist sister. You still with me, kids? So we're visiting my guitarist friend's sister. And her husband takes us to the 688. He's like, it's the best club in town. I now know how hard it is to book clubs, but I kid you not, the manager of the 688 was walking out for his lunch break, and we were walking in with his VHS. And all I can think is he must have thought, these 4 18-year-olds, pale, pasty white kids from Jersey, I got to see what's on this tape. And so we went to his office, and we played a song, and he said, yeah, I'll give you a show in October. And so we moved down.
And then how often were you gigging in these early years? So you're 18.
18.
And I kid you not, somebody is going to send me an email later this semester. Mr. Smith, I was so inspired by Mr. Peter's class visit. I've dropped out of college. I'm moving to Nashville to start my music career.
Yeah, except Mr. Peter's not calling from his villa in France or anything. So, it didn't quite work out the way we had intended. We played a lot. We played anywhere we could. Atlanta at the time had a pretty happening club scene. There are probably 3 or 4 places we played once a month or once every other month. First, you open on a Tuesday night, and you're really nice to everybody who works there because you want to come back on a better night. And you slowly work your way up, and then you're trying to open on the weekends, and then maybe you're headlining on a Wednesday or a Thursday. And then you start trying to get gigs out of state. And so you cold call clubs in Tennessee. Johnson City had some pizzeria we played all the time. I forget the name of it. But Johnson City became a pretty steady money gig for us, once a month.
It's a fantastic college town. It's in the mountains. It's East Tennessee State University. Yep. I mean, it's like Boone.
Yep.
It's like a mini Asheville. I actually just went to a fanzine convention this summer in Johnson City. It's got a hip downtown. Kids
great.
There's kids in Johnson City today that look like they were at the Uncle Green show in 1980.
They might have been.
So then you made albums and stuff, like you made CDs and vinyls, and how did that work?
Vinyl at first, and later on CDs. The first one was self-released, And then we put 3 out with DB Records, which is here in Atlanta. The first B-52 song was Rock Lobster was on DB Records. And then we signed to Atlantic Records and put out a record there. Then they dropped us, and dropped means they don't renew your contract. And then it took a while, and our producer got very famous. So our producer helped us get signed to Sony. He produced the Pearl Jam records and did some stuff with Aerosmith. Like, he became we rode his coattails for a while, and we got signed to Sony, and then Sony dropped us, and then bass player's wife got pregnant, so someone has to get a job.
So how many years was Uncle Green your main career, aside from working in the burger joint or working in the other jobs that you did on the side?
From the time I was 18 until the time I was, say, 31, So the first 14 years of adulthood, you were a full-time rock and roll musician, and
yes. Nobody has ever heard of Uncle Green, like in this room, I don't think.
No, sir.
I never heard of Uncle Green until I heard you talking about your novel on a podcast.
Yeah, it's there are a gazillion bands out there who are really great who just never make it. The same way there are gazillion great authors out there who you've never heard of until your professor makes you.
We're going to be researching 90s music, and I hope somebody decides they want to go and research these unsung bands from the 90s. I've got a list that Gary Graff put out, and then I edited it, of like the 500 best albums of the 90s. But these are all things that you and I have heard of. I bet when they see the list, they've heard of maybe a third of the albums on there at the most. I know they've heard of Tupac is on there, Pearl Jam, Nirvana, but there's a lot of lesser bands. So are you guys, during the time when you have a record label and stuff, is this giving you enough money to live off of? Or did you ever have a sense that that you were famous, or were you always feeling like you were always on the verge? Were you always just like, we're almost there, but we're not quite there?
It might be yes to all the questions you just asked. Like, there were stretches where it was all I did, and you would get advances from the record label or the publishing company, which is a whole separate thing. And you would be able to budget that money, especially if your drummer is the band bank account. We all lived together in a house, and I would run the finances, and we could live for a couple of years sometimes just on that. Did always feel like we were on the verge. You're always trying to hit that next stage, but it was. And there are a few things I've learned from doing this. Somebody asked me a question once, like, what life skills did being an indie rock band give you for the universe? And one was this moment, and this is for all the young kids in the room. We'd always been waiting for that next step. We'd always been waiting to make it and really, quote unquote, start our career. And then one of us, I forget who, said, well, maybe this is our career. Like, maybe this is it. Maybe this right now, what we're doing is in fact a career, and maybe that's enough. Like, it was a great reframing of realizing, like, the process itself and the attempt to sell more records and get to the next step, that is in fact the career. And that's the part you need to enjoy, because that's the part that's going to last the longest.
So for over 10 years, you were a rock and roller full-time.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And there's for a brief period of time, this was your only job. You guys lived in a house. How many gigs a year are you doing during this time period when you're actually living in the house and you have the record contract and stuff?
I mean, it comes in cycles, because you make the record, then you wait for the record to come out, and then you go out on tour. The tours for the 2 major label records for the most, and we go out for 6 weeks and we come home for a week or two, go out for another 5 or 6 weeks and come home for a week or two. So those years we're probably playing 150, 200 shows.
And what are some, I know we asked this, I've asked you this at 10 o'clock, or student did, but what are some of the bigger places you played and some of the bigger bands that you opened up for during that first 12 years? I know you've had reunion shows since then, but during the heyday, the original heyday of Uncle Green, who are some of the bigger venues, bigger gigs?
The opening slots were always great, because you play the much bigger places than we could have on our own. So we did a tour with the Black Crowes. We did a tour with a couple tours with Matthew Sweet. There's a band called Semisonic, who you might remember. Closing Time was their big hit. Did a couple tours with them. And you're playing like 1,000 to 1,500 seat venues. And those are a lot of fun. You're catered. You've got roadies. Like it's pretty much the sweet spot. We played one really big show here in Atlanta for the Music Midtown Festival, like at our peak, on a big stage, at the right time of day. That was for, I don't know, 5,000 people-ish. You know, we had our moment. It was a lot of fun. I've seen 46 of the 50 states.
So you retire at 30.
Yes, sir.
And then you start college.
My first class, the English teacher rolled in, and he had to be like 5 years younger than I was. I'm like, oh, there we go.
You took freshman English from a version of me back then, because I was just starting out as a TA, you know, in Murfreesboro, and there you are. So, and then you become a history professor, but somewhere in there you decide, I'm going to write a novel about this lifestyle that you lived for 12 years.
I mean, I'd always written on the side, like killing time on the road, or when you're home from the road, especially in those years where you don't have to have a day job, you've got all day to do stuff. So I was just writing books, and they were terrible, but each one was, I would be trying something different. There was my trying to be Kurt Vonnegut book. I can see my trying to be John Updike book, you know, my trying to be Garcia Marquez book. Terrible.
So how many of these unpublished novels do you have?
6 or 7.
And are they like at least in Word document, or are they like in notebooks?
They're hard, you know, printed out and got little binders on them, and they're right behind me in the closet. And that's just where they'll stay. Yeah.
No, one day there's an author from rural Tennessee, from Hohenwald, Tennessee, called William Gay. And in his like 60s, he gets discovered.
I remember him, yeah.
He has all the spiral notebooks, and they think he's like the next Faulkner, and he was mentored by that guy that wrote the Corman McCarthy. You know, he's like the next big grit lit, Southern lit guy. And then he dies. You know, he died, and right after he makes it, he's got a couple of golden years, and then he's in with the ancestors. So the book is not about Uncle Green. No, it's not an autobiography.
No,
and you got a really goofy name for your band.
Yes, I needed a band. They're a 3-piece. We were a 4-piece, so you can see already, right? Completely unconnected. And the name of the band is Monkey Hole. It's monkey plus keyhole smushed together. And the funny thing is, like, I was writing a short story about this 20-something deadbeat loser. And his friend, who's an even bigger loser, shows up one day. And his friend's always in a series of terrible bands. And he comes over one night with some joints and says, "You can listen to my new band." And he puts down this cassette tape, and it's Monkey Hole. And our narrator's like, "Oh my God, this could be the worst band ever. Like, I can't wait to hear how bad this band is," because he always feels better because his friend's such a loser. Except it turns out that they get stoned and the cassette is like fantastic. And so our narrator has this realization that he has now been surpassed even by the friend he thought was a loser. Anyway, the story never gets published. I didn't think the story was actually that particularly good. But for whatever reason, I decided to follow the cassette tape and figure out who Monkey Hole was and where they'd come from. And that's what led to the book.
And you build a world. So you have multiple narrators. You have also not narrators, multiple perspectives, because you're not telling it in the first person. Can you explain that technique you're using? Because it is a little intense. And I'm expecting a couple of them might start reading this and be like, I have no idea what this is. I'm a little bit lost, even though the content is kind of hilarious and very spicy. It's definitely a NSFW book, but tell me, and here I am at W teaching it, and you're right. So look, so what is this? Who are all the different characters that we get to look into their version of the story?
You've got the 3 band members, and you'll have chapters from each of their points of view. In fact, I think they each get 2 chapters. You've got a band member's girlfriend, and you'll get her story. You'll get the story of the roadie at some point. And my thinking was that these stories would wind up together, kind of telling a bigger story. And I'm using third person close So you're following Professor Smith, and you're seeing things from his point of view only, no one else in the room, but you're not using I. You know, Professor Smith is dealing with this incredibly long-winded author, and he's trying to think about how to steer the conversation back on topic. And it's Wednesday afternoon, and he's really worried about lunch because he had a faculty meeting, so he didn't even have lunch yet, you know, that kind of thing. My thinking was I wanted to use the band to tell like you said, to create a world. If that's not too, I don't know, full of myself sounding, like the world of this band and how the music almost becomes the main character. The music is almost the connective thread between each chapter. Or think of it like a Netflix series, and there's 12 episodes, and each episode focuses on a different main character.
I like that analogy. And thinking of movies, you know, some of the most famous rock movies, now there's biopics. This class and other iterations of it, we've watched a lot of biopics. We're not watching a biopic this semester, but we've watched, for example, Walk the Line as an, you know, very classic American biopic. But I think in the genre of music movies, the knockoffs are almost better. So you've got Spinal Tap, and then the more newer one, which was a ripoff on Walk the Line, is called Walk Hard. And as I'm reading your book, I kind of felt like, in a way, this was kind of poking fun at the characters a little bit. And there's some scenes in the book that I think if it was the Eagles or Aerosmith or one of these like stadium acts, or even the Black Crowes that you mentioned in the 90s, one of these stadium acts, it would be kind of like, oh, this is gross, this is a rock cliche. But when you take it and it's in this dumpy little club, and now class, spoiler alert, one of the scenes, there's this like person that is like trying to get in on the action, but isn't really invested in any of it. They just want to get some free stuff. And so there's this scene where they're trying to get another character to take them to a strip club. And it just feels like really, it feels super slimy when it's told in the indie club. I mean, I felt kind of sad for everybody, you know, when I read that scene, but the way you write it is also kind of funny too at the same time. And you don't make your protagonist Spider, he's not that great of a guy, you know, like you make him into a bit of a problematic character the whole book. He's redeemed for me by the end, but there's moments in there where I'm like, does Peter hate Spider? I mean, and it's kind of you know, so that's pretty wild. Or it's your lead singer, I guess. You were the drummer. So it's not you. So it's not you. Spider's not you then. He's the lead singer?
I mean, they're all me and they're all not me.
Right, okay.
I think of him as not a great guy, but to me Spider is somebody for whom the music and the band came above everything else, came before everything else. And there is a period in your life where that has to be the case, for none of us in the band had particularly great relationships outside of the band, because if you're gone for 6 weeks, 7 weeks at a stretch, it's really hard to maintain that. But you're always going to choose the 6 or 7 weeks on the road because it's serving what for you is the prime cause at this point, which is success for this band. And so for Spider, it's even more than just a band. It's all about his songs getting out into the world. And whatever he has to do to serve that is what he's going to do. But it is a little sad at times, for sure. That doesn't mean you stop doing it. It just means you realize that you're in a moment where you're at some strip club in Alabama and you just have to make it through until you can get out of there.
Are there people that Spider's based on a little bit?
I mean, I think there's certainly a lead singer archetype. I mean, the best frontmen and women are basically pure ego. It is really the best way to get that across. Like, I saw Prince twice, and when he strode onto the stage, there was no doubt we were all in his control for the next however many hours he was out there. Now, Janelle Monáe, the same thing. The minute she hits the stage, the entire venue gets focused right there. And that's hard to pull off. It's a certain mentality. So he's based, in my mind, on successful songwriters and successful frontmen, and especially the combination of the two.
So I need to go back and spend some time with the band camp, but you did an insane world building thing here. You made an album that's out there so we can go and listen to the Monkey Hole album, even though the band is a fictional band. So what does it say in the Monkey Hole press release? Like, what are they Like, what? Give us the. Let's pretend. Work with me here, Peter. Let's pretend that we're at a pitch meeting and you're trying to get some airplay. I think there's actually a scene in the book that's a little bit like this, but pitch the Monkey Hole album, the one that they can actually go and get off of Bandcamp or Spotify. What are we talking about here? What is this record?
Well, then I'm going to pitch the soundtrack. The soundtrack has not just Monkey Hole, but many other bands from the time period. So you get the band that's sort of like the, remember the band Garbage? There's a song on there that I wanted modeled after Garbage, that band. So the Monkey Hole soundtrack is a classic collection of 90s era bands, both successful and unsuccessful.
Were you relieved when it ended, when the dream ended and you guys cashed it in, or were you like crushed, or were you just like, were you depressed? What was that transition from rock star to, I mean, mid-level indie rock star to author, grad student in history, college professor? What is that? Is this actually better than that? Like, or or is part of this book like we all do? I mean, I'm more obsessed with the 90s now and the 80s now than I was during the 80s and the 90s, you know, in a way. I'm more obsessed with REM than when I saw them play, you know, on the Reckoning tour, you know, and they're retired. I can't go see them today.
No.
So do you like this version of you better now, or did you have to surrender a lot of stuff when you finally accepted that you weren't going to be doing this for your full-time job anymore?
And it's not a better or worse thing, I don't think. I mean, in the immediate aftermath, it was a bit crushing because we'd been working on this since we were in 9th grade. And after the Sony contract wasn't picked up, we actually were almost signed by MCA, to the point where the contract was going back between the record company and our manager. And then the guy who was going to sign us got fired. And the whole thing just collapsed. And that's the point where we just couldn't start all over again. So it took some shifting to understand that I wasn't going to get up tomorrow wondering what I could do to make Uncle Green famous. But the relief you talk about, that comes later on, because then you're like, well, I have always wanted to go to college, and I'm going to go to college. And for 3 years, I was an undergrad. Thank you, Georgia State, for the Hope Scholarship. It made it possible for me to go there. And the shift to novelist is really satisfying in a different way, because I don't know if you know this, but not a lot of people want to talk to the drummer, per se, for interviews about stuff. I never had a microphone. I was never a singer. They would sometimes, before the encore, make me go out and talk into the microphone and introduce us, just so I would have to say something on the mic. But now when I do book events or podcasts or things like this, it's just me talking. And I've discovered that I kind of like talking about books and music, and that all the other crap, the good and bad crap that came before, has kind of led me to this moment in time and this day with your classroom. And it's kind of amazing. We're at the age now, right? I'm going to speak for myself and assume you're similar age-ish, more or less. And we've got friends whose parents are passing on, or I've got a couple of friends fighting cancer who've been told they have X number of months to live. Like, you're 18 or 19 and listening to me, maybe, and thinking that's never going to happen, but it's going to happen. And the challenge is to really understand that, like, I get to sit here in front of my drum set, which I'm going to go play after this. I'm going to record a song from a friend of mine who lives in Brooklyn, and then I'll go work on a book. Like, it's kind of amazing.
Yeah, this is amazing. So Way to Sound is your first book. Then you put out another book, Songs for Honeybird, which is, I actually think I might even like better than Way to Sound, and I loved Way to Sound. And now you've got a third book that's coming out this spring.
Yes.
That takes place with a whole different premise. And yeah, so what you said really hit me, though, in the heart cavity here, because I lost in last 3 years, I lost two cousins that were my age. And I'm a recovered drug addict and alcoholic. So every day for me is like extra time on earth.
Yeah.
you're getting to still make music in addition to having all these other things, you know. And you got to have a family. You have a family too, right?
Yeah.
You were able to do all the things.
Yeah.
So
I did the things.
it's pretty freaking great. I hope they like your book if they like your book even a portion as much as I like it. And I've asked them in the past. I hope they will this time to share. A couple of them will let me share their responses to your book. Everybody here is going to write a paper about your book. So I won't share the ones where they write about a different book. Every semester I have somebody who actually makes up a book that doesn't exist or writes about a book that some other guy named Peter wrote that they Googled at the, you know, at 11, the papers due at 11:59. At 11:30, they Googled some guy named Peter and they wrote about a book that doesn't exist or that I did not assign. So, but I won't send you that one. All right, class, we got time for two or three questions before we let Peter get to his drum practice. You guys did great on Monday, so let's hear from the class. They're still awake. Nobody's sleeping. They're taking notes in their notebook and they're doodling on their paper. So I don't think we've lost anybody. I think we kept them in the zone. Let's go. Okay, Hayden in the back. Go ahead.
You said you were going to be recording a song. Did those things that you record go anywhere? Private.
So is this music that you're working on now? Tell us, he wants to know about the song you're actually working on. Is it going to be released and is it for the public?
It is. There's a singer-songwriter in Brooklyn named Eitan Mirsky, Mirsky. There was a movie years ago called Happiness, and the themes of that soundtrack he wrote. Actually, Michael Stipe sings it on the soundtrack. Anyway, he records a song with a producer in New York. They have computer drums on, and then I'll go and I'll replace the computer drums with real drums or acoustic drums. And it'll probably be out. I think this last song for the record. We've done like 11 songs kind of this way. At this point, I just do it for stuff that I really like. So I like these songs. It should be out in the summer.
Yeah, I did not hype this enough in the first class, and I want to hype it now for Hayden's great question. And that is Hayden. And we also have in our class a Caden and an Aiden as well.
Wow.
So Uncle Green has music on Apple Music, Spotify.
Yep.
So you can go and listen to the band that he was in high school, and through up until his early 30s. They have several professionally released records that you can go stream wherever you stream your music. And the soundtrack to this book that we've assigned in this class by this pretend band Monkey Hole is available also for us to go listen to.
And great YouTube videos with my hair down to here behind the drum set, which is really, kind of hard to beat.
Okay, so I think I've done a little bit of a dive. I've done the shallow dive. I owe you a deep dive, Peter. That's freaking incredible. Okay, next question. Come on, we got a couple more before I let you go. All right, we got one right here.
You didn't go to college after retiring. Where do you see yourself now?
After he retires from what he's doing now?
After he retired from the previous band, if he didn't go to college, what did he see himself?
Oh, what was plan B to being a history professor when you left? Like in your early 30s, what's the alternate ending to your life if you didn't become a history professor and a novelist?
That's a good question. When I started college, I had no idea what I was going to do, except that I hated history. But I took a history class that I really liked. And so it became a minor, and then it became a double major. I think I always knew I wanted to teach. And I've learned over the years that there's the stage show and the classroom structure are actually, I think, very similar. I got about 45 minutes if I'm opening up an act somewhere. You start with a classic. You accept that about halfway through, some people are going to go buy beer and stuff, and you're going to lose them. And you want to end strong, right? Leaving them wanting more, maybe to go buy a T-shirt. And it's just like a college class, right? Where you're going to lose some in the middle, no matter what. Maybe not you. I usually lose a few in the middle, but we try to structure it to tell a cohesive story from beginning, middle, and end. It's the same way with a set on stage. It's the same way with a book. So I probably always would be a storyteller, a teacher. I thought I would be an English teacher somewhere, but I'm a history teacher.
So I was never a history teacher, but I was a rock and roll journalist, a full-time rock and roll journalist,
Nice.
Writing about Uncle Green. My biggest, I think, was right when they were peaking. I got to interview Ian MacKaye, and I got to do a feature in the Free Weekly on Fugazi. That was probably the peak. That was peak.
That's big. Yeah.
As a journalist in the early 90s. One more question. Okay, we got one over here from Presley.
Is there a song you associate with your 80s like your music career? Or is there like a certain song that you hear and makes you think of that?
And you mean his other artists, the peers to Uncle Green, right? You don't mean his own song.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what songs from the 90s make you, what songs by other artists from the 90s will take you back and put you in that van driving, you said, from Chicago to Madison, yep, from Johnson City to Nashville? What song from that time period are you listening to in the van? If you heard it right now, you would be all up in your feels about those days.
Excellent question, because I'm told, like, music does that, right? Certain songs will always put you in certain places. Matthew Sweet, who we toured with a lot, and his song Girlfriend, if you hit play on that right now, right, I'm in sound check in some club in the Midwest, you know, and we're going to play that night, and it's 1993 or something. Like, that's super vivid for me.
Peter, thank you so incredibly much. I can't wait to read their papers about your book. I'll get them in in February. I'll get a small batch, and then I'll get another batch in April. I can't wait for your next book to come out. I'm going to spend a little bit more time with the Monkey Hole album and keep nagging them to look for other bands at the next layer below the top tier from the 90s, as we're going to be making a collective mixtape, if you will.
Oh, fantastic.
For the 90s. Maybe you'll end up on even one of their playlists. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye, Peter.
See you.
All right. So I got 2 really good conversations with him. I tried to keep him a